Señores, Donald Trump salió con los sentimientos heridos. Resulta que a pesar de que la Casa Blanca habría ordenado a los medios bloquear cualquier sonido de protestas, abucheos, etc., aún así, Trump fue abucheado tan fuerte en el US Open. En medio de las pantallas de televisión en todo el país, lo transmitieron a máximo volumen. Absolutamente hilarante. ¿Qué fue lo que hizo Trump? Perdió la cabeza y empezó a publicar una serie de mensajes furiosos. Es más, hasta se negó de que lo hayan abucheado. Vamos a repasar todo esto, señores. Veremos cómo un demócrata acaba de exponerlo, cómo los votantes lo abuchearon en vivo y muchas noticias más. Así que los invito a que se queden conmigo hasta el final de este video porque veremos lo más interesante de este suceso. Antes de que vayamos directo al show en el US Open, quiero empezar con otro montaje que Trump ha estado preparando en Baltimore. Y también veremos la increíble respuesta por parte del gobernador demócrata Wes Moore. Escuchemos.
That the president, when you're looking at the big, beautiful bill, it actually cut $30 million of funding for violence prevention programs that are happening in the city of Baltimore and across the state of Maryland. And when I first came on board, I was very clear that public safety was going to be our #1 priority. And we have made historic investments in local law enforcement, historic investments in technologies and making sure that if someone commits a violent crime with a handgun, we want them in handcuffs in 24 hours. So the work is happening. And actually, if you're looking at the same time period of this DC occupation, this federal surge, if you look at assaults with a deadly weapon, they've actually increased in D.C. by 8%. In Baltimore, have decreased by 10%. And on every other major indicator, from homicides to carjackings, you say that Baltimore has actually had the same type of drop as Washington, D.C. has had during this period, and we didn't mobilize the National Guard for it.
Well, it seems like the president is not backing down on this policy. In fact, I want to show you a post. This was posted yesterday. President Trump shared this on his social media account. It's directed at Chicago, and it reads, quote, "I love the smell of deportations in the morning, and Chicago about to find out why it's called the Department of War." Illinois Governor Pritzker called this a threat. Would you go so far as to call this a threat?
I call it a threat. I call it embarrassing. I would call it performative. And I do want to be clear about some of the stats. When people talk about how we've watched a decrease because of the National Guard, let's be clear about some of the stats. That the National Guard are responsible during this occupation for 744 cubic yards of mulch spread, 886 bags of trash collected, 270 feet of fence painted. You know what we don't have stats on? How many illegal guns has the National Guard seized? How many drug busts has the National Guard done?
And yet crime is down in D.C.
Oh, as it is in Baltimore. And in fact, if you're looking at the crime numbers in Baltimore, they're down around the same percentage from D.C. during the surge. And we did not have to ask these citizen soldiers to give up their lives and ask the American people to pay well over $1 million a day so we could have fences painted.
Ahí lo tienen. Donald Trump no tiene políticas reales para la seguridad. Solo quiere intimidar, quiere abrir el camino para la ley marcial. Sus soluciones son puro teatro autoritario. Hablando del teatro, pues bueno, volvamos al abucheo porque la escena fue clarísima. Donald Trump aparece en la pantalla gigante, empieza a sonar el himno nacional. Y bueno, la multitud vino después. No hay forma de poder negarlo. Fuerte y claro. Es más, cada titular lo recogió de la siguiente manera. Donald Trump abucheado en el US Open. Incluso la propia Casa Blanca tuvo que difundir este clip. Pero bueno, Trump reaccionó como siempre, mintiendo y negando lo obvio, ¿no? Para colmo, salió a circular la versión de que ESPN bajó el sonido en la transmisión oficial. Y no es coincidencia, ¿no? Porque los medios recibieron instrucciones. Tenían que cortar los micrófonos, subir ruido de ambiente, para poder ocultar los abucheos. Un intento descarado de censura, más que todo con las protestas que estaban sucediendo en Washington, D.C. Aquí, amigos, tenemos el punto clave. No es lo mismo que enviar a sus matones a tomar ciudades, pero claro, es el mismo patrón autoritario. Así es, el querido líder decide que es ilegal avergonzarlo en público. Entonces, ya estamos muy avanzados en el camino del fascismo. Mientras tanto, pues los mismos conservadores que todos los días lloran por la libertad de expresión, guardan silencio, hipócritas. Se quejan porque no pueden decir insultos racistas sin consecuencias legales. Pero ahí están felices de tener un presidente ordenando qué se puede o no mostrar en televisión. ¿Dónde está la libertad de expresión? Censura de Estado. Lo más grave es que esta semana Trump ya ha dado uno que otro paso, ¿no? En esa misma línea autoritaria. La senadora Tammy Duckworth lo dijo alto y claro. Escuchemos.
Vice President Vance says there aren't plans to send in troops. Do you have concrete indication now that there are plans to do so?
Well, let's make it clear. The President of the United States essentially just declared war on a major city in his own nation. This is not normal, Margaret. This is not acceptable behavior. No, we don't have any indications of them getting ready to send troops into Chicago. In fact, I was out at Great Lakes base yesterday, Naval Training Base, and they were able to confirm that the only assistance they've been requested to provide is just office space for ICE. But that there are no barracks, no detention facilities, none of that is being requested or prepared in order to support troops into Chicago.
So, so then is this just, social media trash talk? When you say he's declaring war, is this tongue in cheek?
I think he's renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War. And did he not just say that Chicago will find out what it means to be at war? I take what the President of the United States says very seriously, because that is the respect you have to give to the office. And if that's what he's declaring, then let me make it clear. It would be an illegal order to declare war on a major city, any city within the United States by the President of the United States.
Senator, I know you just mentioned you went out to the Great Lakes Naval Training Station, I should say, and you said the military leadership said they'll only get office space. ICE cannot bring in lethal munitions, and the resources will not be diverted from military training. So all of that together, did you breathe a sigh of relief and say this won't have a real impact on the military?
Well, we're going to make sure that there's not an impact on the military. We need to make sure that as you know, Great Lakes Naval Training Base is where every single recruit in the United States Navy goes through to get their basic training, and then later on some advanced training. We need to make sure that not a single dollar, not a single penny of the resources that they have that should be directed towards training our nation's sailors and making them ready to do their jobs. None of that money needs to be diverted in order to support ICE or any of Donald Trump's political theater efforts. We need to focus on making sure we turn out the very best sailors we possibly can out of the base.
So in terms of how Democrats are responding to this rhetoric, the Chicago Tribune faulted Governor Pritzker for his threats to, quote, not stand idly by if the Guard went in. They wrote, what does that threat actually mean? How about a conversation before the action or the response? Because it's all potentially harmful to collective health. It sounds like there's a lot of tension here. Is there an opportunity to work with the administration to avoid making this worse?
Well, they've not responded to any of our requests. I mean, I'll give you a very concrete example. Senator Durbin, myself, Senator Schneider, Congressman Schneider, sent requests into DHS to ask them to explain what exactly are you going to be doing at Great Lakes, and can we come look at your facility so we have a better understanding of what your operations are. And they replied, no, you can't, and in fact gave their staff the day off on the day that we went to go look at their facilities, and locked the doors and left the base. Basically, they fled the base. This is not the action of someone that's doing something legal or that they're proud of. They literally gave their people the day off, locked the doors, and left. Now, the Navy allowed us onto the post. They allowed us to tour the outside of the facility and also where they would be storing the non-lethal munitions. But DHS did not show up. And we certainly have sent the administration multiple inquiries about what they're planning on doing. Who are they bringing into Chicago? Are they planning to bring the National Guard in? They've done none of that. They've not even reached out to local law enforcement to try to coordinate. You know, if they were truly, truly interested in fighting crime, then they would work with local law enforcement and ask them, what do you need? What help do you need? And we've not gotten any communications or feedback from the administration whatsoever.
I want to ask you in your armed services role about what is a significant geopolitical meeting this past week. You had a lot of America's adversaries gathering together. Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of them in Beijing. And China and Russia seem to be deepening their work together. What do you think the signal to the United States here is?
The signal to the United States is exactly what these authoritarian regimes want to send, which is that they are the new world power, that America is losing its ground, and that they have utter disrespect for the United States. I think it was very, very clear. And it doesn't escape me the fact that once this meeting happened, which was humiliating to Donald Trump, he immediately responds by saying, well, then I'm going to rename the Department of Defense the Department of War and declare war in Chicago. This is what Donald Trump does. When something bad happens to him in the news cycle, or when the Epstein victims come together and have a very emotional press conference, he changes the topic and distracts us by saying things like, I'm going to send ICE into Chicago.
Así es, señores. Esta es una administración sin principios, sin respeto por la ley, sin otro objetivo más que enriquecer al trumpismo y poseer a los liberales. Eso es todo. Ahora bien, señores, lógico que todo esto trae consecuencias, ¿no? El 59% de los votantes desaprueba cómo es que se maneja el tema de comercio, de los aranceles, etc. Casi 6 de cada 10 personas lo dicen claramente. La estrategia del trumpismo no funciona. Y ojo que estamos hablando de lo que alguna vez Trump llegó a presumir como su superpoder, la economía. Pues ahora se le está desmoronando en la cara. Quiero que hablemos de cómo la política arancelaria, la política económica de Trump, lejos de fortalecer el país, termina generando más inflación, más incertidumbre y mucho más caos. Lo más grave es que incluso dentro del propio Partido Republicano ya existe una división, porque muchos de sus propios aliados están reconociendo que esto no tiene nada de sentido económico. Escuchemos esta noticia.
A new NBC News poll shows dwindling trust in President Trump's handling of pocketbook issues. On Trump's handling of inflation and the cost of living, 39% of Americans approve, while 61% disapprove. 45% say inflation and the cost of living is the most important economic issue right now. And 59% disapprove of Trump's handling of trade and tariffs as the White House tees up a Supreme Court fight after an appeals court struck down Trump's tariffs.
We would have to give a refund on about half the tariffs, which would be terrible for the Treasury.
And you're prepared to give those refunds?
Well, I mean, there's no be prepared. If the court says it, we'd have to do it.
Molly and Mark are back with me. So, Molly, voters used to think the economy was Trump's superpower. What changed?
I mean, Liberation Day, right? Look, I was heartened to see a member of Trump's cabinet say they have to do something the courts told them to do. I mean, that's a refreshing change. No, look, everyone said this is going to be inflationary, right? If you don't do tariffs with the scalpel, it's going to be inflationary. And so here we have tariffs that are basically based on Donald Trump's mood. So sometimes they're high, sometimes they're low, sometimes they're on India, sometimes, there's no thought for, it's not thought out. There's not this idea that you would make a deal with Canada and Mexico first because they're your largest trading partners and then go forward. Some of the ideas, like so many things with Trumpism, some of the ideas are, potentially very good or thoughtful. Clearly there's a problem with trade in China, but the way that they're implemented are so haphazard and really emotional in a way that you don't want your government acting.
I got to tell you, your line there, at least they have to admit that they have to do something the courts tell them to do. I'm now deeming you a glass half full kind of girl. So, Mark, Scott Bessent confirmed this, that NBC News report today, that the White House is exploring alternative laws the president could use to keep Trump tariffs in place if the Supreme Court strikes them down. Could they be hearing the justices or not on Trump's side on this?
It's unclear what they're hearing, but I mean, the term alternative laws is pretty chilling here. I mean, you know, when the Supreme Court
like
rules
alternative facts, remember that one?
Yeah, well, I mean, that did sort of echo to that, but I mean, It's like, okay, well, the Supreme Court says this, but we're going to look to an alternative law here and do it anyway. I mean, that's a little troubling in some ways. I mean, look, there are a lot of Republicans out there, certainly in Washington that I talk to, elected Republicans who would not in a million years say anything against Donald Trump publicly, but who really think that the Supreme Court or the courts in general could save Donald Trump and by extension today's Republican Party from itself by striking down these tariffs. I mean, they do not like tariffs, a lot of these guys. I mean, they did not earlier. They have not throughout their whole careers. It's very fundamentally against a lot of conservative principles that these people have been espousing for years until Donald Trump came in and said, no, tariffs are the be all and end all for everything. So, I mean, I think they're all over the map here. But look, I mean, this is uncertainty. It is uncertainty. It certainly doesn't look like it's helped the economy or inflation to this point. And if they say that no matter what the Supreme Court says, they're going to explore other mechanisms, I mean, that is uncertain too, and it sort of guarantees more chaos going forward. So I don't think that's reassuring to anyone.
Well, and the fact is that Republicans, by tradition, have always been against raising taxes, and everybody sees the tariffs as being a tax that Americans are having to pay. So, Molly, you have Senator Warner, who was on the talk shows today. He was talking about how extraordinary it was for him to be blocked from a Senate oversight meeting at a spy agency after interference from far-right activist Laura Loomer. How is she allowed to have so much influence?
Look, I just want to go back to the tariffs for 1 second, because I just think this is such an important data point here. The plaintiffs in the tariff case, right, are the surviving Koch brother. It's a group of conservatives, right, Leonard Leo types, who have a real relationship with the court and who are very much, you know, more of the ethos of the traditional Republican Party. So I just think it's quite interesting that, you know, the plaintiff here is brought by a sort of group that brings lawsuits like this. And it really is a sort of Republican versus Republican fight here. So I just think that's really important to see. And I do agree with what Mark said. This is really saving. If they are able to do this, they will really have saved Trump from his worst instincts. As for Laura Loomer, this White House, this administration, even in the first term, always had a very low bar for who they let into the administration, partially because they had trouble getting, at least in the first administration, trouble getting good people. The second administration, they've gotten sort of, the party has become them. But so it's always been very easy to kind of get in Trump's inner circle, if you know what to say, which clearly Loomer does. I mean, I think it's interesting that there isn't more of a pushback from Republicans on this, because it's so sort of deviates from the norm.
So, Mark, last word to you on Laura Loomer. Does she have the power because she has Trump's ear? And do you get a sense that those even around Donald Trump are like, really?
Yeah, I mean, bingo. I mean, that's been happening before. I mean, Laura Loomer has Trump's ear. The second she doesn't, I mean, she will lose probably pretty much most of, if not all of her power in this administration. You know, there's precedent for this. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene had it for a while. You know, Mike Lindell, the voting machine guy. The pillow guy, that's right, the My Pillow guy. In the first term, I mean, look, so there's a precedent for this. Eventually they fall out of favor. But no, I mean, this power is real, and this is how this White House operates. And it's in some ways very nimble, but it's also, you know, around the whims of one person.
Okay. Thanks, you guys, for sticking around through most of this hour. Molly, good to see you, obviously.
Lo que estamos viendo nos deja algo claro. La política de Trump con los aranceles es cualquier cosa menos algo serio. Los impone según su estado de ánimo, sin una estrategia clara. Y eso termina generando ¿qué? Inflación. Termina encareciendo los productos básicos. Golpea directamente el bolsillo estadounidense. Cuando un presidente actúa de esta manera, no está protegiendo a los trabajadores, menos aún a la industria nacional. Está creando un impuesto encubierto. Y al final, el que termina pagando esto son las familias. Y ojo que no lo digo yo, lo dicen hasta los propios republicanos tradicionales, lo reconocen. Porque los aranceles siempre fueron vistos como un impuesto contrario a los principios conservadores. Ahora sé que algunos defensores de Trump salen y dicen, pero que los aranceles son necesarios para poder enfrentar a China, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. Claro, el problema no es reconocer que hay desafíos con China, sino cómo se lo hace. Y Donald Trump lo ha hecho de la peor manera, improvisando, generando incertidumbre en los mercados, rompiendo alianzas estratégicas con socios como Canadá y México. Eso no es ser un negociador duro, eso es ser un negociador torpe. Lo más preocupante es que incluso cuando los tribunales dicen que sus medidas son ilegales, porque sí señores, ya lo han dicho, la Casa Blanca busca leyes alternativas. Todo esto para poder mantener estos aranceles a toda costa. Eso es peligrosísimo. Significa que Trump está más que dispuesto a saltarse todas las reglas, con tal de no admitir que se equivocó. ¿Ustedes se imaginan el nivel de caos que esto genera para la economía y para la confianza en los inversionistas? Lo que vemos, señores, es el reflejo del estilo de gobierno trumpista. Improvisación, ego, capricho, todo lo que esté por encima de la lógica, de la estabilidad económica. El resultado, lo tenemos a vista, 59% de desaprobación, rechazo brutal. Nos demuestra que los estadounidenses no se están comprando el cuento de que Trump es bueno para la economía. Yo lo tengo clarísimo, estas políticas de Trump no solo fracasaron, sino que están dejando una factura altísima, que la gente común va a terminar pagando. Pero bueno, quiero saber qué opinan ustedes. ¿Creen que Trump realmente tenía una estrategia con los aranceles o simplemente actuó por impulso? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerda, como siempre, dale like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.